Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports, where today we are talking about some problems currently going on with the Philadelphia Flyers, as well as other news and notes around the NHL. Guys, thank you for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. Thank you for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. Make sure that you check out our website down below, i80sports.com, for all of our NHL coverage. And we're rolling into Super Bowl Sunday in about a week now. So you got to check out what our NFL coverage is currently doing for that, as well as the NCAA football crew getting ready for this current offseason, especially as the draft rolls around. And got to keep up with that soccer content. Check out our MLS content, check out our NBA content, and check out our wrestling content as well. While you're on our website, check out our shop. Get yourself a t-shirt as low as $8. We've got new designs on our website right now. And if you like the design that we currently have in the top right-hand corner of your screen, that's one of the designs that you can find on our website, on our shop. Make sure you hit up our shop and check that out. And if you're on Twitter, make sure you follow us down below at I80_sports NHL. If you're following us already, thank you guys so much, because we greatly value all of your support. And if you're here on our website and are not aware of our YouTube page, make sure you check us out, youtube.com/I80sports. Hit the bell, like, comment, subscribe if you're not subscribed already. More algorithmic things, yay. But I'm Brian, he's Tom. Tom, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Here we are in the middle of the season, I guess you could say, even though we did that last week. But still, we have the All-Star game coming up. I don't know. You ask me, it's a gimmick, but maybe I'll watch a little bit of it on Saturday. They put it on, and I want to open with this. I know I'm going a little off off script here, but one thing I will give ESPN and the TV gurus over at the league is they did do the right thing. They put it on at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon in the middle of February when nobody has anything better to do. So you might just get a lot of people watching just out of sheer boredom because they have nothing else to do.
That's true. No football this weekend because everybody's getting ready for the Pro Bowl. And who's really watching the Pro Bowl? Sorry, Tom. I mean, not sorry, Tom. Sorry, Bob. Sorry, Steve. Nobody is watching the Pro Bowl. I'm sorry. More people are going to flock to the NHL All-Star game because there are sights to behold there. And if you're curious, check out the skills competition on Friday. That's what I'm going to be doing. I mean, that's been more the attraction for me. But we got to dive into some news and notes heading into the All-Star break. So it's time for our traffic report.
The I-80 Sports Traffic Report, where you can find all your news and notes from the week.
I was worried leading into this week that we weren't going to have a lot of news going on, because if you saw our midseason report last week, there was not a lot in the news last week. And this week we actually had one big thing happen. The Anaheim Ducks have hired former NHL player and former assistant general manager in Tampa Bay and Detroit, Pat Verbeek. So Devils fans are very familiar with this name here. Pat Verbeek has been Steve Yzerman's assistant general manager in Tampa Bay and now in Detroit. He was also the general manager of the Grand Rapids AHL affiliate in Detroit as well. And he's certainly coming in with a bit of experience, and this would be his first general managing position. Tom, just quick reactions here. Is this a good move for Anaheim?
Yes, it is. And one little fun fact, Pat Verbeek also played for the Rangers. He was Mark Messier's right winger for a season. If they both would have been healthy that year, they would have had 50 goals apiece. They both were on a towards goal-scoring pace that year, and they both got hurt. And if they would have kept Verbeek the next year, maybe they would have had a chance of beating a team we're going to talk about later on. But let's let the past be the past. I think it's well-deserved by Pat Verbeek. He's cut his teeth in this league. He's paid his dues working with Yzerman in Tampa and Detroit. He's going to Anaheim. And I guess it's an interesting situation there is because Anaheim, while good, has been sort of a surprise team this year. So Anaheim, there's the chance that they will make the playoffs. I think there's a better chance that they will than they won't. I don't think it's a guarantee, but I think it's looking more than likely that they probably will make it. But at the same time, they've been a surprise team. So at the same time, Anaheim comes back down to earth next year. Verbeek won't be under as much fire, under as much pressure, scrutiny, I guess you could say. So I think it's the right move for Anaheim. A lot of good players in that system and a lot of good stuff to work with. And you know what? The unfortunate part about it, and I guess what may put a great cloud in this whole thing, is the first big move he may have to make is to decide what to do with Ryan Getzlaf. It's something he's going to be faced with right away.
I think this is a really good move for Anaheim. And I think ultimately Pat Verbeek is inheriting a very interesting Anaheim Ducks team that currently has quite a bit of prospect depth at the moment, and prospects that are even coming into their own in the NHL, namely Trevor Zegras, and Jamie Drysdale is moving along quite well in the NHL as well. He's developing as an NHL defender, especially on the offensive side of things. Troy Terry is also developing right now very, very, very nicely for the Anaheim Ducks, really breaking out and making a name for himself in the NHL this year, especially as a goal scorer. And Pat Verbeek is going to have some decisions ahead of him for the Anaheim Ducks. What are you going to do with Ryan Getzlaf? Is John Gibson your goaltender moving forward for the future? You know, there's some really interesting decisions that Pat Verbeek is going to need to make immediately and also over the course of the next year. But that's for any general manager that would be coming in. And he comes in with the experience as well. And also, he was a former fantastic player for years. Pat Verbeek is not somebody to scoff at in terms of his playing ability and his vision on the ice, as well as he is a person that knows what he's looking at on the ice. This is a player that in over 1,400 career games scored over 1,000 points. He scored over 500 goals in his NHL career, 522 to be exact. Also had 540 assists to boot with that. He is also a Stanley Cup winner. He won a Stanley Cup with the New York Rangers. He also
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. He wasn't there.
He was traded that season. My bad. He
came the next year. They traded a first round pick to Hartford for him. He won. I'll let you go on. I'll let you continue now.
My bad. Yeah, no, that's true, though. I almost forgot that he missed it by just that much. But he didn't miss it in Dallas because he did win a Stanley Cup in Dallas. So he did finally get a Stanley Cup. This is a guy that knows what it takes to make playoff teams and then make it eventually to the crown that is the Stanley Cup. And working under Steve Yzerman for the past number of years is great experience. Steve Yzerman is doing great things in Detroit. Steve Yzerman did great things in Tampa Bay. Look at how Tampa Bay has quite a bit of a dynasty on their hands right now. That is in many ways thanks to Steve Yzerman and some of the moves that he made when he first initially came in as the general manager of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Looking at what Detroit is doing right now, Steve Yzerman could have a decent team on his hands over the course of the next few years as well in Detroit. So Pat Verbeek is bringing that experience, a lot of that learning that he gained from Steve Yzerman, from working in Tampa Bay, from working in Detroit, and now he's going to take that to Anaheim. And we'll just have to see what kind of moves, what kind of experience he is going to bring to the Anaheim Ducks. But I think if you're an Anaheim Ducks fan, I would be excited by this move. I think it's a positive step in the right direction for the Anaheim Ducks. But we'll evaluate this move later on as well. Moving on, we've got some quick hits real quick. I know Tom's got some quick hits too. I'll start off with the quick hits that I had. We had some minor trades. And when I say minor, they're really, really super minor. Tampa Bay Lightning traded Alexei Lipanov. I know I totally butchered that name, but it's fine. To the Dallas Stars for Ty Falabar. And then Tampa Bay turned around and also made another trade. They traded Jimmy Huntington to the Nashville Predators for Anthony Richard. Next, Montreal Canadiens are down a defenseman. David Savard has been placed on injury reserve with an ankle injury, and he could be out over a month. It's looking like he's not going to come back for at least until late March at this point. We mentioned last week about Aaron Dell's suspension and that he injured Drake Batharson, but we didn't know the severity at that point. We now know the severity of Drake Batherson's injury. It is an ankle injury. He has been placed on IR, and he's going to be out until middle to late March, at least at the moment. I would not be surprised if we don't see him until April. Lastly, on my quick hits, the Chicago Blackhawks are currently conducting an active search for their next general manager, with former players and coaches assisting in the process, namely Eddie Olczyk, Patrick Sharp, And I know that there's another name out there that is currently assisting in the current search for that general manager. So Chicago is quite antsy to name a general manager sometime in the near future. And it seems like they're taking proper steps, although the ownership of the Chicago Blackhawks a few days ago did not really look too great when talking about 2010. So if you want to find that video and know what I'm talking about, figure it out there. Tom, what did you want to mention in terms of your quick hits?
Well, two of my favorite parts of the game, international play. This week it was announced that they're in the planning stages to hold the rescheduled World Juniors in August, which is good. So right now, it's like I said, and I've said it before, and I sound like a broken record in previous episodes, it's still early, but now at least we have a timetable, because a lot of us were wondering, okay, well, when are they going to do it? They said they want to do it in August to make sure, everybody is healthy and ready to go, just in case, guys getting ready to go to training camp or whatnot. Obviously, it's not middle of the season, but hell, hey, it's better than not having it at all or having a half-ass version like we just did. Now, another thing on top of that, 20 minutes ago, per Pierre LeBrun, the NHL and the NHLPA are conducting preliminary talks to hold a World Cup of Hockey in 2024, but not in September. In February, when the Olympic break would have been, which would have been this year, before everything got totally messed up. So that's also something great to have. And, maybe the games will be local like they were in 96. I remember in 96, for those who just started listening to us, we live in New Jersey, in the greater New York metropolitan area. And, well, if I was older in 96, I would have probably been able to attend every Team USA game possible, because they were in places like Philly, New York, and Montreal. And there was one game in Ottawa, it was a semifinal game, but alas, the tournament is planned to be in February. But please, and I know I'll harken back to this, and I sound like a broken record, and I don't care. Do it right. No Team Europe, no U23. Do it right. You want to look how to do it? Go back and watch how it was done in 96. That tournament was done perfectly. 04 was okay. 04 was kind of just a Team Canada spectacle, though. But go back and look at how you ran it in 96. The tournament was run perfect in 96. So seriously, go back to that format or something like it.
I would also be excited to see a World Cup of Hockey, especially in 2024, because I think Team USA by then is going to have a very, very interesting team that I think could be very competitive with Team Canada that year. And I think that would be a sight to see, especially since we're not getting that this year with the Olympics. So,
no, go ahead.
No. I was going to allow you to go on that one.
No, and for our Canadian friends, it'll finally give them a chance to see Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid play together at least once.
Which would be great. That would be a lot of fun to watch too. But those are our news and notes for this week. But it's time to kind of crush some Philly fans' dreams right now. It's time, as always, to pump the brakes.
Not so fast. It's time to pump the brakes.
Yeah, so we mentioned it last week that we were going to kind of highlight the Philadelphia Flyers this week, and we're living true to that. We're going to highlight the Philadelphia Flyers this week. Yes, they have been gaining in the standings, especially because of the shortcomings of the New Jersey Devils right now, something I certainly don't want to talk about right now. But that being said, living up to our promise, we're going to talk about the Philadelphia Flyers because they've got some bigger internal problems than a lot of the teams in the Metropolitan Division right now. So there's quite a bit to unpack here, so let's go. So we need context first before we start diving into our personal analysis on diagnosing the problems right now in Philadelphia. So first things first, what's their current record? They are 15-22-8 going into the All-Star break, which leads them right now being sixth in the Metropolitan Division as of this recording. Leading scorers on this Philadelphia Flyers team this year, Cam Atkinson leads the team with 36 points. Next, the captain, Claude Giroux, with 35 points. And lastly, Travis Konechny with 25 points. So we have quite a drop-off between Claude Giroux and Travis Konechny. 10-point differential there. So we have some identified problems here. We have some problems that we have known for sure. So one big problem has been the consistency of goaltending. Carter Hart is playing better hockey as of late, but for how long? We've rode this train before. Martin Jones has not been a steady backup either. There have been coaching inconsistencies as well. There have been 2 coaches this year. Alain Vigneault ran this team way too hard and was seen as out of touch. Mike Yao isn't faring much better either. Their power play right now is abysmal. 14% on the power play right now. And for context, the league average is 20% this year. So the power play is among the worst in the entire NHL. Generating offense has been a major problem for the Philadelphia Flyers as of late. Next, the defense has been rather lackluster. Rasmus Ristolainen, as a lot of people thought, not really living up to expectations in Philadelphia. Keith Yandle, although he's an Iron Man, could probably use a sitting. He could probably sit a few games and not have to take a lot of the load that he has been, even playing on the third pairing, which he's usually been relegated to. The defense has also been giving up a lot of high-risk chances per game, hence why Carter Hart and Martin Jones have not been able to play at their top ability right now. And finally, the biggest problem, this lineup lacks depth and could use more younger guys to spruce up this lineup and eventually, plan for the future. So that being said, Philadelphia and the ownership of the Philadelphia Flyers have mentioned that they're opening up shop in March for the trade deadline, which the trade deadline, I believe, is March 21st. They're opening up shop. They're looking to deal a few pieces. So what are going to be some trade targets from the Philadelphia Flyers? Claude Giroux is the biggest name right now on this list. Claude Giroux could be one of the biggest names for the entire trade deadline. Any potential playoff team would love to have Claude Giroux going into this current playoffs. Next, Cam Atkinson. Cam Atkinson is desirable just because, yes, his contract is high at over $5 million per year, but he's under control for the next 3 to 4 years. So you're not just getting somebody who's a rental, but you're getting somebody who's going to be there maybe for the next few years and kind of build around. Next, James Van Riemsdyk might be a little bit more difficult to deal a contract like that. He is making $7 million a year, but he's only making that for this year and next year, and then he's finally a UFA. And then lastly, Keith Yandle, just simply because he's got a very friendly contract for this year, and he brings playoff experience and leadership to any team that could really use that boost in the locker room going into this playoff. Who's in the pipeline for the Philadelphia Flyers right now? Some top prospects of theirs currently, you've got Cam York, Morgan Frost, who has also seen 23 games so far this year. Isaac Ratcliffe, who has also seen 2 games. Cam York, also to mention from before, has also gotten into 13 games so far. And also Tyson Forster, who was drafted last year by the Philadelphia Flyers. So with all of this context that we just mentioned, Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you for a little bit. What does Philadelphia need to do to take proper steps in the right direction for their franchise moving forward? You have the floor, sir.
Well, I mean, the obvious answer here is they need to draft well, number one. And number two, they need to stay the course on what they're doing. And by stay the course, I mean, don't do what they did 10 years ago. When they got to the finals against Chicago back in 2010, I think their eyes got a little too bright. You had a bright young future. You had bright young players in Jeff Carter, Mike Richards, and then the aforementioned Claude Giroux. The problem was that, they got to the finals. They beat the Rangers on the last day of the season. They played the Blackhawks tough. But just because they got to the finals didn't necessarily mean they were a Stanley Cup contender. They were just sort of a Cinderella team. I think them winning the Atlantic the following year was also sort of kind of a farce because you had Pittsburgh, who had Crosby and Malkin out all year. The Rangers were sort of in a bridge mode. The Devils, that was the year they brought Kovalchuk in, but basically the house blew up on them. And you had the Islanders, who were horrible. Also had the Islanders, who were horrible. I'm trying to remember the old Atlantic Division. I got everybody down. So that was just sort of, okay, the Flyers were the least worst team of that group of 5, and they won a division. And I think that ownership just got a little too giddy with that, and that's why they are where they are now. So with them, obviously, A, you have to draft well. B, you have to stay the course. Now, in terms of your trade targets, we'll go back to that real quick. You have Claude Giroux, Cam Atkinson, Middletown, New Jersey native James Van Riemsdyk, and Keith Yandle. Now, obviously, Giroux, that's your cream of the crop right there. There's no doubt about it. I find it hard to believe that Claude Giroux will be finishing the season in the Philadelphia Flyers uniform. But it also depends what your return for Giroux is going to be. You're obviously going to get a first-rounder back. You're obviously going to get a prospect back. But it's a matter of who's going to give you the best deal. And it also depends on where you're going to trade him to. Now, a lot of people say Colorado Avalanche, Colorado Avalanche, Colorado Avalanche. Makes a lot of sense, right? It does. But there's going to be two problems with that one as well. Colorado may want to make Philly eat some of his salary, number one. Number two, Colorado is going to be drafting lower in the first round. So now if I'm Chuck Fletcher, I want to think, okay, I want to trade this guy to a contender, but I don't want to trade. I still want to have a little bit of a higher pick in the draft, because if you look at Giroux was like, I think, a 16th overall. And you know what? They lucked out with him. You have Cam Atkinson. Atkinson's another guy. You know, you send him somewhere else. I don't know if you can necessarily build around a Cam Atkinson anywhere, but I think Cam Atkinson, for a bubble playoff team, he could be that good second or third line center option. But Cam Atkinson is another one. They're going to want a lot for Cam Atkinson, and in reality, I think you might get something lower than a blue chip prospect and maybe a second rounder for Cam Atkinson. James Van Riemsdyk. James Van Riemsdyk is the tough one. James Van Riemsdyk, if they want to dump him, that's going to be a guy who another team's going to hold a gun to their head and say, we'll take him. We'll give you some assets back. And I don't even know if Van Riemsdyk's going to be worth a first rounder either, or a blue chip prospect. That may be a second rounder, and that may be just some prospects that may be prospects that a team has a surplus on in a certain position for James Van Riemsdyk. But the thing with Van Riemsdyk is this. I think with Van Riemsdyk, that's going to be one where they're definitely going to have to eat some salary. They're going to have to take some salary back on Van Riemsdyk. I just think in my mind, that's a given. Now we move on to Keith Yandle. Yandle, actually, his deal is very team friendly. It really is. And the thing with Yandle is he's a serviceable guy on your bottom pair, your bottom defensive pair. So I think Yandle's going to be a slam dunk to get traded, but it's also them. They're a rebuilding team. They're going to play hardball with other teams. But I think at the end of the day, I think, it's obviously going to be Giroux and Yandle are going to go. I think Atkinson they're going to play hardball with, and it may very well be that if they don't get what they want, that you still see Atkinson and JVR playing for the Flyers at the end of the season. And maybe they try to do something. Maybe they try to revisit those deals in the summertime. I don't know. The thing with Philly is this. You also brought up a great point with who they have in the pipeline. York, Frost, Ratcliffe, and Forrester. They're all good players, yes. But are those players that you can base your future on? I think that they're good pieces. I think that they can be good pieces, but I don't think they can be a key focal point of a team. I just don't think so. You also have guys there in Couturier, Konecki. I am butchering the name, and I know how to say it, and I'm still not saying it right. Farabee and Provorov, also good players. But the question is this. Are those players that you can make a key focal point of your team? And my answer is, I don't think so. My answer is, I don't think so. This team needs to amass draft picks. They need to hope that the luck of the lottery brings them maybe a Shane Wright or a Connor Bedard. But that's the luck of the lottery, It's how the cards fall. But like I said before, I'm gonna harken back to it. What they really need to do is they got to make sure they draft well. And I know I said that before, but stay the course. It's something the Flyers haven't done throughout their history. They have never stayed the course of what they wanted to do. Whether it be with Lindros, whether it be the years with Jeremy Roenick and all of them, the Flyers just sort of seem to be that team that just keeps bringing players in to bring players in and, try to put a Band-Aid, they try to patch a stab wound with a Band-Aid. I mean, I remember in 2012, look at what they did. 2011, rather, I'm sorry. You dumped your two cornerstones of that franchise at the time, and Mike Richards and Jeff Carter, and said that Ilya Bryzgalov and Jaromir Jagr were better replacements than them. To this day, and I had Flyer fans who were drinking the Kool-Aid back then. To this day, I still scratch my head and wonder, how could you think that was okay as a Flyer fan? How could you think that was okay? How? And another thing they need to do, and this has nothing to do with anything I said before, is something they should have done. They need to realize what path they want to go on. They need to stop with this. We're going to try to, like I said, put a Band-Aid on a stab wound, to make the playoff, miss the playoff factor every year, which doesn't give them any stability or any direction of where they want to go. They need to pick a direction, and they need to stay with that direction, whether they make the playoffs, whether they don't, whether they're in last place, whether they go to the finals. They need to not abandon what they're doing, because throughout the last 10 years, that's something that the Flyers have done. The Flyers have tried to just fix things real fast, and then it goes their way, and then they abandon what they're doing, or they bring guys in, and if they go on a little run, they try to fast forward it, and they abandon what they're doing. And maybe that's why they haven't been able to win a Stanley Cup. Maybe that's why after they lost to Chicago, they weren't able to get back. Maybe that's why the years where Giroux was their top center, they were never able to capitalize on it. You know, people do talk highly about these Flyers, but you know something? After they lost to Chicago, they only got out of round one, with the exception of last year in the bubble. They were only out of round one once, and that was when they beat the Penguins in that clown car series, I'll call it, because those games were ridiculous. It was like watching a circus on ice. So, yeah, that's just my thoughts on what the Flyers are doing now and what they need to do. Like I said, they need to draft well. They need to stay the course. And you know what? Like I said, they need to make sure that when they are trading these guys, and maybe not so much Giroux and Yandle, but Atkinson and JVR, they need to make sure they're getting back. What they're getting back is going to be worth it in the future.
Yeah, and a lot of good thoughts there by Tom, and I'm going to kind of echo a lot of these thoughts right now. And for me, honestly, this team needs a fresh coat of paint, which means the potential of a rebuild. And a lot of people get so jumpy when they hear the term rebuild. It's just like, oh my God, we suck again. But rebuilds can be good if done properly. Here's the problem. This team has not been remotely dominant, remotely a playoff contender year in and year out since Paul Holmgren was their general manager, which dates back to 2014 at this point. We're about 8 years past that at this point. Ron Hextall, when he was general manager up until 2018, he made some moves to improve this team, but you now have a current general manager in Chuck Fletcher, and I can't say I'm confident in Chuck Fletcher's ability to navigate this team through a rebuild or retool. Maybe that's one thing that Philadelphia, in terms of ownership, needs to consider going into this upcoming offseason. A very pivotal offseason and kind of a, crossroads for the Philadelphia Flyers coming into this upcoming offseason. This is probably going to be one of the most important off seasons for the Philadelphia Flyers in the past 15 years. Where does the direction of this franchise go? Do you want to hitch your saddle to Chuck Fletcher for the long term as your general manager? Is he the right guy to make these decisions? Or do you bring in somebody else with a different vision to rebuild this team? You also have a few faces to build around where if this team can get younger and improve in the next 5 years, these faces can lead the charge with this younger group. Sean Couturier, Travis Konechny, Joel Farabee, Ivan Provorov, Ryan Ellis, and even Carter Hart. Carter Hart had a rough sophomore year last year, and he's been on that road to redemption since. He's been steadily improving on a worse team than he had last year. This current Flyers team is not better than last year's. Not at all. If anything, it's a downgrade, especially with the injuries to key players such as Sean Couturier and Ryan Ellis. Carter Hart, I think, will be okay, and I think he is the right goaltender to eventually build this team around. There's a reason why they drafted this kid as high as they did in the second round a number of years ago, and he's shown flashes of brilliance. So I think he is still the right guy to build around. Their current prospect pool is weak in comparison to other teams in the same boat as they are right now, being a bottom feeder team at the moment. And this team would really benefit from getting a top 3 pick next year. I think getting a top 3 pick this year is a possibility, but Who knows? I think next year would be a better possibility to get a top 3 pick. And I think next year's top 3 is stronger when you have Connor Bedard and Michkov also in there as well. As hard as it is, it's time to let go of the past and trade off some familiar faces, namely Claude Giroux. Giroux is worth decent draft capital and prospect variety. So I think with Claude Giroux, you can definitely get a first-round pick. You can definitely get a blue-chip prospect back. You can also, even if you really wanted to, get an NHL-ready player back in return for that as well. You could get all 3 in that same deal. It all depends on who you trade him to. But I think that's a great place to start if you're thinking about really committing towards a rebuild. Next, dealing James Van Riemsdyk might be difficult because of his contract. Plus, what do you really do as a franchise, and what do you gain with that cap space right now? Beyond re-signing most of your defense core, which, yeah, there are a lot of players on your defense core that could, use new contracts. Justin Braun, Rasmus Ristolainen, if you do want to re-up him. Ivan Provorov already got paid, so you don't need to worry about that. Ryan Ellis already got paid, so you don't need to worry about that. Cam York eventually is going to need a payday down the line, but, it's going to depend on how he progresses. But I think trading James Van Riemsdyk just for the sake of trading James Van Riemsdyk, I don't think you're really going to get the return that you really want. I don't think he's worth even a second-round pick, especially with him making $7 million a year. I think you're lucky if you get even a 4th-round pick, and you also have to absorb some of that contract in return as well. I think that's just going to be too difficult of a deal to make. It might be more advantageous just to keep him around, just to keep you somewhat competitive. But I think trading someone like Keith Yandle could make a lot of sense for a team in the hunt for the playoffs, because he would make a great 7th defenseman on any aspiring playoff team. A couple teams I'm looking at, Florida could be a really good landing spot. Familiar with the area, was with Florida for a few years, and Florida looks like they could be a team primed for a deep playoff run. So having Keith Yandle as an emergency defenseman could actually be really good, and he's another voice in the locker room. Edmonton could really use another defenseman like Keith Yandle right about now, even with Yandle's current deficiencies. Lastly, this team needs to be smarter in the scouting department. Morgan Frost has been invisible on the ice, and he is one of the Flyers' top prospects. He's one of the guys that, the Flyers have been excited to see on the ice finally in the NHL. He hasn't done much in his time there. In 23 games, I think he has a grand total of about 8 or 9 points. It's been a little lackluster so far for his start to his NHL career. But then again, plenty of players start off slow and eventually make their way. Jack Hughes was labeled as a bust, and he's a point per game player now. Joe Thornton, I mentioned on a number of occasions as like the classic example of guys that were labeled a bust, with high expectation. But Morgan Frost is a little bit different. You drafted Morgan Frost not even in the 1st round. This is a much, much different, scenario here. But he's one of those guys that needs to step up, and you kind of think, is this the guy that we're really building around? Cam York is developing, but defensemen take years to develop in general, and you really don't get the real scope of what type of player they're really going to be until they've played and logged at least 2 seasons worth of games in the NHL. So the verdict is still out on Cam York. And Tyson Foerster hasn't even played an NHL game yet, and he is not living up to expectations, and they wasted a high draft pick on him. He was a reach pick last year as well. Is he a guy that you're going to build around? Maybe, maybe not. The Flyers need to rebuild their prospect pool with the hope of building a decent team in the next 3 to 5 years. Unfortunately, this team could be a bottom dweller for a while yet to come. I know that sucks to hear for Philadelphia fans, because this has been a team that has usually been right around the playoff bubble and usually, been right around the 1st round, 2nd round of playoffs, but the problems outweigh any kind of success that they do have on the ice, and hitting the reset button is the right thing. Should they change GMs? Maybe. Should they maybe find a new permanent solution as a head coach after Mike Yao is done this upcoming season? Maybe. It might not be a bad idea to do so. But ultimately, this team needs to freshen up that prospect pool. They have one of the weakest prospect pools in the entire NHL, and especially for a team in 6th place in the Metropolitan Division, that's not a good sign. And hopefully with trading some of the players that we mentioned above, especially like Claude Giroux, that takes steps in the right direction to properly rebuilding the Philadelphia Flyers, so that way they can be a scary team yet to come, especially with their current building blocks. But I think we're just about ready to move on from the Philadelphia Flyers. But I think Tom wanted to mention a couple more things here with the Philadelphia Flyers, just to rain on the parade of Philly fans out there.
Well, actually, one has to do with the Flyers, and one has nothing to do with the Flyers.
Okay.
My other thing I forgot to mention was this, is that we're talking about Chuck Fletcher and the whatnot. And my other thing and I totally forgot to mention, I'm sorry, guys, we're way out of order tonight, so I'm sorry for driving you nuts. I am wondering how much control Chuck Fletcher really has over there. Because if there's one thing throughout the Flyers' history they had when Ed Snyder owned the team, Ed Snyder would do anything and everything to make them better. Now, I do wonder now, and Brian, you would know this as a Yankee fan, George Steinbrenner was sort of the same type of owner. He would do anything to win. Now, with this team being owned by Comcast Spectator, rather, do they really care about winning, or do they really care about a bottom line? When you're owned by a corporation as opposed to being owned by a sole owner, that's what it sort of turns into. It gets to a point where you have a guy like George Steinbrenner and Ed Snyder and the like, who would do anything and everything to win games, to win trophies. I mean, obviously the Flyers didn't win as many trophies as the Yankees won, but still, you get my drift. After those two gentlemen passed away, it sort of turned into, okay, let's profit. Let's cash in on the brand. Let's increase prices for this, that, and the other thing, and screw the on-ice product as long as we get people in the building. Sort of like Harold Ballard with the Maple Leafs in the 70s. He was the originator of that. So that's just a thought that crossed my mind, and I meant to mention it before, and I just totally forgot about it. I'm sorry, guys. And another thing, we had mentioned way back in the beginning of the show about the Chicago Blackhawks looking for a GM. I just read some news that they're talking to, and Blackhawks fans, you're going to hate me, Peter Chiarelli.
Ooh. That's a little scary in my mind. We saw how he ran the Edmonton Oilers. We saw the contract that he offered Milan Lucic. Now, probably the only thing that ended up being right was the Leon Draisaitl deal. And in hindsight, yes, offering him that large amount of money after only one season of success was a risk. Draisaitl has certainly lived up to the hype, but good Lord, you could have looked at other people.
I mean, he hasn't been hired. They're just talking to him.
Oh, I know. But usually talks turns to paper and putting pen to paper. And I don't know. Could be a little scary. We'll see.
Right.
And with the decisions that Chicago's been making lately, can you really put this past them?
Chicago, where dynasties are born and then die just as quick as they were born. Look at the Bulls.
Pretty much. It's just oh, I'm sorry. We have a good team. Thanos snap. But we're going to move away from Philly here. We're also going to move away from Chicago here. We talked quite at length about that. We hope that you guys comment down below to let us know. But first, before we start wrapping up this show, we have got to talk about some of the high performers of the past week. Let's talk high performance.
Your I-80 Sports High Performance Players of the Week.
Tom, who do you want to highlight this week, and why do I also have a feeling that you're going to be a homer?
I'm going to be a little bit of a homer, and it really wasn't a great little run, but Alexis Lafreniere goals in back-to-back games, looking like a first-line player. Another guy I want to highlight is somebody I brought up last week, Nazem Kadri, who has been that second-line, secondary scoring for the Avs, but he's leading the team in scoring. 9 points in his last 5. Avs are looking good. They've been looking good. I'm tooting my own horn. I'm sounding like a broken record. They're really just running through the league right now.
Of course, you had to. You had to be the homer and mention Lafreniere. Had to.
He played good. He's been playing good.
Yeah, I guess. But I'm going to mention a few different players here, and actually I'm going to be on a little bit of the Florida bandwagon here. So, well, here we are. Let's get right at it. So, Sam Reinhart, in his past 8 games, 13 points, 5 goals, 8 assists. He has been on a roll lately. He has been really fun to watch on the ice lately. Mason Marchman has also been another player that's been a lot of fun to watch lately for the Florida Panthers. 12 points in his last 8 games as well, 6 goals, 6 assists. Another player that's also been a lot of fun to watch for the Florida Panthers, who maybe if he continues his current production, could maybe even get some Calder votes. Anton Lundell, who also just got named Rookie of the Month this past month. He's been over a point per game in the month of January. He's looked fantastic lately. And as I already knew, a guy that was given a year to develop, and I even knew before he was given that year to develop that he was going to be a pretty good NHL player, and he is living up to the hype so far with the Florida Panthers. He has been fantastic. Some honorable mentions I also want to mention here. Sidney Crosby, just doing Sidney Crosby things. Age 34, he's 14 points in his last 8 games, 6 goals, 8 assists, still over a point per game player in the NHL, and he's shown no signs of slowing down at all. He's played really, really well. Mitch Marner, I'm going to give credit where credit's due here.
Yes.
He kicked the utter crap out of the Devils this past week. And 6 goals, 6 assists in his last 5, 12 points in his last 5 games. He's been impressive lately. But I'm still going to bag on him for being one of the most overrated players in the entire NHL. So it's an honorable mention, but not really. You still need to prove that you can do it without Austin Matthews. Just saying. But time to wrap up this episode with our question of the day, which, to go back to the Philly stories, is there any way that the Philadelphia Flyers can salvage this season in any way? Tom, what do you think?
No, they can't. And in reality, I was listening to the panel a couple weeks ago on TNT, Wayne Gretzky, Paul Bissonnette, Anson Carter. And I think what they're saying is pretty much being echoed around the rest of the league and around fans of the league. I think right now the 8 teams you have in the playoffs in the East aren't going anywhere. I think they're all staying there. Are they going to finish in the order they're in right now? No. But I think right now the 8 teams you have in playoff spots in the Eastern Conference are staying in those 8 spots. Now, as a Flyer, if you were a Flyer fan, and I know this from experience as a Ranger fan 4 years ago when Gorton put the letter out, why would you want them to salvage the season? You know, at this point, if you're going to announce a rebuild to make the team better in the future, why would you want them potentially going on a run and finish 500 or over 500 to be maybe at the cusp of the playoffs and not make it and screw your draft up? Why would you want that? So I don't think the Flyers are. They've been playing a little bit better, but even though they've been playing better, I just think right now your 4 teams in the Metro, Carolina, Rangers, Penguins, and DC aren't going anywhere. Your 4 teams in the Atlantic, Tampa, Florida, Toronto, and Boston aren't going anywhere. They're not gonna come down. So yeah, I don't think there's any way to salvage the season. And like I said, as a rebuilder, why would you want to?
Yeah, I mean, for me, is there really any way that this team can, salvage their season? No, probably not. You deal Claude Giroux, you see what fun, interesting things you can get back in return, and I say see what you got in Morgan Frost and just kind of challenge him a little bit and say, let's see what you got, kid. Time to step up into the top 6. Let's see what you can do. And just go from there. But for this season, I think Philly season is just about done here. I think we've seen enough. And for Philly fans out there, I think it's time to put you guys out of your misery because you're going to be finishing somewhere between 6th and 8th. It's just a matter of how, the dice fall. But as always, guys, what do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree with our takes? You got to let us know in the comments down below. And while you're there, drop a like and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. But you can also find all of our content on our website, i80sports.com. You can find all of our NHL content where you can also find our NFL, our MLS, NCAA football, NBA, and wrestling content there as well. While you're there, hit up the shop, get yourself a t-shirt as low as $8. Check out our new designs there if you like what you see in the top right-hand corner of your screen. If you like that design, that's one of the designs that you can get on one of our brand spanking new t-shirts. So hit up our shop, get yourself some cool merch while you're there. And if you're on Twitter, make sure you follow us down below at i80_sportsNHL. And if you're following us already, thank you guys so much because we greatly value all of your support. Without you guys, we can't do this on a weekly basis. But It's time to stop bagging on Philly for a week. Let's go enjoy what is the gimmick of the All-Star game, and then we'll be back with our regularly scheduled program, as always, next week. But for now, I'm Brian. He's been Tom. This has been yet another episode of NHL on I-80 Sports.